Thank you so much for the video. And hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Global Peace Studies for Sustainable Development in Africa, where we discuss pertinent issues of peace and sustainability in Africa and around the world. Thank you so much for your availability today and to share these great ideas by our guest, who is a familiar figure in our Peace Studies webinar, Professor Eliseu Tito Njaico, who is a professor of philosophy and ethics at the Catholic University of Mozambique. He's currently working as a program manager at the Institute of Distance Education of the Catholic University in Tete branch, Mozambique. And the theme today is ethics, culture, and education, a reflection on the path to peace in Africa, a very relevant topic for all of us today. And so he will be sharing the screen soon, and then he will speak to us for about an hour, and then we will have question and answer session. So let's try and share the screen. It's a pleasure having you, Eliseu. And so you may please proceed, and we ask everybody to please mute your microphones. You may leave your cameras on because it's also nice to see you. So thank you and welcome, Eliseu.
Thank you, Dr. George. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you also for the invitation to be part of this global community of people seeking for peace. And thank you for encouraging me to do something on peace. And thank you for everything I've learned from this platform and everything I will learn from this platform. Thank you for the presentation. And as you just said, yes, this is Eliseu. I read and write on social and political philosophy, development, management, and education due to my educational process. And I will be presenting my sketch on the role of education, culture, and ethics in peace building in Africa. For the first slide, the next slide. Next slide, please. Be talking as we search for the next slide. The next slide is a table of contents where I'm showing the sketch of the whole work, the structure of the presentation, and we have a brief introduction, the context and the problems, and we have a definition of concepts where we define ethics, education, and culture, and we also discuss on historical background of peace in political philosophy, where we talk of social contract, moral obligations, the treaties, and education and culture. And then we talk also for challenges of peace building in Africa, and we take the case of corruption as one of the biggest problems we have in the continent. And then I discuss on the relevance of ethics, culture, and education in peace building. in the brief introduction, I talk about the context and where we consider that conflicts are not new to humankind. They are normal social facts created by humans in their diverse interests that collide once in a while. So George, haven't got yet move the slide.
Just a moment, please proceed. I'll be joining you.
All right. Thank you. And so, since it's a kind of social fact, we have accounts of turbulent times in ancient Greece, with its city-states conflicting with each other until the Great Peloponnesian War and ancient Chinese states, and many other accounts which alert us that the survival and the sustainability of any human society depends on the existence of rules, principles, and customs that connect people and regulate their behavior in social relationships. And humans are compelled to the ethical duty, individually or collectively, to take tasks, which are choices at every single moment of life, to either provide answers to fundamental questions or to answer them on the cause of their actions. And most philosophers, starting from Socrates, many others later, were deeply concerned in understanding the nature of human life, thus invoking an analysis of private and public morality. In his dialogues, for example, from the Republic, the Crito, and the Apology, Plato lies his ethical and political theories, stating that man has got to examine himself in order to become aware of the conditions that affect him to effectively commit himself to common life and actions. Yes, that's it. And we know that through education, we are taught from childhood the rules of social conduct to form our points of view and stimulate habit forming and moral accepted behaviors. We are also warned to always beware of mistakes that have tragic and fatal effects on us as individuals and as society. So we grow learning day by day, and the lessons learned drive our choices and shape our lives individually and socially. I invite each and every one of us to imagine humankind, to imagine life in the situations we are in right now. The good and evil happening together in our places, Ukraine, Mozambique, Congo, Ethiopia, Afghanistan, Eritrea, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Palestine, Israel, and many other countries. But also natural disasters, floods, droughts, earthquakes, wildfires, extreme weather conditions, etc. All political, social, and economic instabilities driven by terrorism, illiteracy, poverty, corruption, inequalities, etc., and threatening mankind. What is the judgment we make about their finality? The fundamental question that we have to make is, can we do something to stop them? We do not intend in this study to bring absolute solutions to conflict. Neither do we want to deny its social role. It could be illusory to have a society of mere cooperation without conflict. So now we move into the problems. Since we are talking about Africa, what are the kind of problems that we are facing, and we have to discuss here about them? I connect my call or my study to Professor Ware's presentation on 23rd of March with the title, The Complex Relationship Between Peace and Development in Africa. I remember her running through the contextualization of the problem, saying that conflict in Africa is over power and resources, not ideology. And that the causes of war in Africa are lack of quality education, which makes the road easy for unemployment, distribution irregularities, which make it difficult for the poor to access available goods and services, poor governance characterized by weak democracy, etc. And I agree with her, but also I would still raise a minor question, why I try to answer them too, which are, how do we separate then ideology with the quest for power and access to resources? In my article published in this forum, I have attempted to argue that Africa, actually it was, I have submitted it to the articles that we sent for publication in spring publication. So in the article, I try to argue that Africa has a broad diversity of skilled people and also abundant resources. So perhaps, as Professor Lumumba puts it, a rich continent is weak politically and economically, disorganized socially and confused culturally and spiritually due to leadership covering poor governance, disorganization, and taking the form of moral, cultural, and spiritual malaise. But another major problem that we face in Africa, it is on the obsolete political systems. Most institutions in Africa carry obsolete topics in its structure. Leadership is stuck in post-colonial mindsets, resisting to receive fresh ideas. It is a generational conflict, and youth are frustrated. An example of this is evident in the course of globalization and the role it plays. It is a key to social development processes and serving as a driver of scientific advances, and it changes worldwide conversely. In most African societies, globalization, conversely, is a problem favoring disintegration in the existing political, social, and economic structures. Complex questions, we understand that require complex answers. And we can take as examples COVID-19 cases, natural resources management versus multinational companies, terrorism, etc. Our societies are too less flexible to get the maximum of innovation trends. And that can also even take us to question some of the paradigms of African Union, SADC, ECOWAS, CEDEAO kind of performance, since they are African organizations. Next slide, please. So the challenges of peace building. The first challenge for peace building in Africa, we see it as poverty. According to World Bank reports, many countries in East Asia and Pacific have registered a fall in poverty rates. In contrast, for decades, Africa has been kept static and immersed in unresolved conflicts, getting significant growth in birth rates and putting food security and nutrition on the major challenges. The same always would be said of access to quality health and education services, clean water, the promotion of inclusive and productive employment. Moreover, justice and the rule of law have been a big challenge keeping governments unaccountable to its citizens, and the ruling using public resources for private interests in general. The World Bank itself acknowledges that even development aid given to Africa, only 10% reaches the final recipient. The second challenge is corruption, as we've just been saying. A social and institutional evil has taken hold and is quickly spread to all vital sectors. According to Mozambique Strategic Anti-Corruption Proposal of Anti-Corruption Bureau, its causes start from weak commitment of leaders and society to fight it. And it happens and develops where laws are not enforced to protect the public good and interest, but instead are used to defend private and particular interests. Second, its lack of accountability linked to abuse of power and weakness of institutional accountability mechanisms. It manifests itself through some agents' irresponsible conduct in the dimensions of social, public, and private life, who are not guided by ethical values in their behavior. And what are the causes of corruption, for example? It diverts state revenues into the pockets of individuals. It reduces levels of investment. It increases public expenditure due to high costs of development projects, which are sometimes of poor quality. It reduces productivity and innovation, with officials spending time and resources in bribes rather than stimulating economic and social development. So corruption disorganizes, disorients the political power, devalues laws and established institutions, and foreshadows values and choices of its citizens, worsens inequalities, weakens countries and its leaderships. Next, please. Yes, so next we try to define the key concepts of our research, which are, the first concept is ethics. We discuss about ethics, and we talk of ethics, especially looking into two dimensions of the ethical knowledge, which is one, the dimension of the human act, and the other, the dimension of social assimilation of values. And we also look the concept as a philosophical reflection, where it is taken as science or branch of philosophy, which studies and evaluates the conduct, performance of human beings individually and collectively. So ethics, it's assumed here as rules an individual should learn to obtain social identity and stability. Next concept, next slide, please. Yes. The second concept we are looking at is of education, and especially on the role it plays for individuals and for society. As we've just said, that we looked at individuals and society. So education, it is a system of values with knowledge, skills, attitude, and culture, and values which are given to humans that are taken as a repository of knowledge, and they are used to modify their intelligence, build their personalities, and promote or transform society for better. And also education is taken as a complex process of construction, preparation, and integration of an individual's identity in society. It improves humans' faculties and conditions, production systems, gives stability to culture, and transforms humanity for better. In Africa, education, ethics, and culture are all inseparable. They are all together because they're present from birth to death through rituals and life experiences. So an individual assimilates values, is endowed with the rights and duties, autonomy, and responsibility throughout life. Next slide, please. And now we look at culture. And we also look at culture from two perspectives. The first perspective is that one of broader sense, which is we take culture as a complex and interdependent set of knowledge. In this aspect, we assume culture as a positive thing, where we look at beliefs, laws, traditions, arts, customs, and habits that people have. But also we look at culture in a restricted sense, which encompasses all knowledge and tradition of a society, sometimes taken as negative, those negative aspects. That's why sometimes culture is confused with the tradition, because we look at patterns of behavior, traits, attitude, norms, values it provides that have always been taken to be negative sometimes, but they can be perfected through education and critical thinking. And we assume that culture is a set of collective meanings or representations historically constructed through generations and shared among group members. Next, please. Yes. So now we look at what the philosophical contributions to our study, to peace. When we read the literature on interest for peace studies, we see that most of them, they say that we learn of peace studies from tragedies that took place from First and Second World War, and those career experiences which scared a lot of people, and most people were wounded socially, spiritually, physically. But when we look into philosophical literature, we see that the studies of peace began long time ago, starting from the ancient philosophy itself. And there we find philosophers discussing that peace is not a natural order. It is an artificial order. That's why it is complex. Peace can be seen from different perspectives: religious, political, social, and even cultural. And we as humans, we have the potential to build peace. That's why we have here some ideas that we bring from some philosophers. And the first of them is Thomas Hobbes, who assumes that human nature is deterministic and mechanical. And he's quite pessimistic. We're all equal, moved by unlimited desires of possession and the fear of death. And that is what makes us look for other men. That's why the state of nature, it is that state of a man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. We need a kind of an organization so that we can fear its authority into our course of action, according to Hobbes. And we have Locke also, we assume that in the state of nature, all men are rational, free, at peace, goodwill, and mutuality. And men have to live in order to make the state. They have to live some of their rights, liberty by mutual consent, to enter into political society in order to establish a common good and public safety. That's why the function of the state, it is to guarantee that right of establishing a common good. And then we have also Rousseau, who sees man as a rational being, free, good, a good savage, pure, innocent, unconscious, and ignorant of good and evil. Using education, we can become conscious and civilized. This is the part one of philosophical contribution. So can we go to the next slide? So when we see the three discussions from these three philosophers, that takes us to discuss the role of ethics. What is the role of ethics in building peace? So we see that ethics has got a necessary role in society because first, it assumes humans as social and rational beings with capacity to draw, guide, to draw rules and guiding ourselves into negotiations using the supreme principle of intellectual and moral nature. But also through ethics, we understand that science, we understand it as a science of customs, which implies the notion of good and evil, duty and obligation, responsibility, etc., which are contents of conscience. Once again, in this point, we understand that war represents evil, and we as rational beings, we can avoid it. Again, when we read into Book 4 of Nicomachean Ethics, we find the principle of justice, which, according to Aristotle, says it lies in making the rules and respect them, which means we are talking about the constitutions of our states. We have made them and we have to make use of them. That we find it in Book 4. So I can bring, for example, an example of failures in when we have good rules, but maybe we cannot follow the spirit that goes behind the good rules. We don't have a problem of rules. We have a problem of constitutionalism, which is the spirit behind the constitution. So I will just give a clue on natural resources that we have, for example, in Mozambique, so that we can see if we had ethics in front of our action, of our conduct, what gains would we have from all of that we have. I take Mozambique as an example. The country has almost 30 million people, most of them young. And in terms of resources, apart from this 30 million people, we have 36 million hectares of arable land. We have mineral resources, including natural gas, mineral coal, forests, gold, heavy sands, precious stones, graphite and limestones, marine coastline of 2,600 kilometers, fishing riches, rivers favorable to hydroelectric production and lakes, reservoirs of water, favorable climate for tourism and agriculture, etc. Harnessing these results for progress and well-being depends on our aspirations, the ability to make development agenda, and the quality of institutions, particularly those for training, education, to bring answer to problems, and those of justice, to ensure balance in power and access to resources. This is just an example of Mozambique in terms of resources. So we can move to another. Yes, this is it. And now we move into the next, which is peace as moral obligation, which is the second contribution of philosophy. In the second contribution of philosophy, we have we talk of peace as a moral obligation, and philosophy as a science and ethics as a branch of philosophy. It helps humans to have knowledge, and through that we pass judgment on almost everything, and judgment is a platform for learning. Isocrates, for example, I bring an example of the discourse of Isocrates, who talks on peace, and this is a piece of writing from 356 BC. It talks of justice and utility principles when it talks on the role of peace as a moral obligation. I will just pass a reading on the text, what it says. It says, first, I affirm the necessity of establishing peace, not only with Chaos, Rhodes, and Byzantium, but with all the people and of applying not only the treaties that some are currently drafting, but those that have been made with the king of Persia and with the Lacedaemonians, which prescribe that the Greeks shall be independent and that each shall be master of his own territory. Indeed, we shall not find anything more just or more useful for the city. Here, the perspective of Isocrates offers us peace as a result of respect between states. Isocrates invokes peace treaties signed in present and in past, in which freedom and sovereignty of states are considered on the basis of the moral principle according to which promises must be kept. Pacta sunt servanda. We can perceive that peace agreements signed between states result in the mutual obligation of their fulfillment, which means promises are valid when there is an internal rule with ethic values. Therefore, based on the moral reasoning, humans ought to choose peace and avoid war. Next, please. Next slide. On this slide, since we've been talking about the role, the moral obligation, we bring here a context on which we can discuss moral obligation, and we bring here culture. In these cultural examples, I bring two cases. In the first case is that of Chinua Achebe's, which is written in The Things Fall Apart from Nigeria. And the second is of Tsitsi Dangarempa, a Zimbabwean writer who also talks of nervous conditions. In both novels, these two authors discuss that no person will contradict the cultural establishment principles without witnessing its own fall. So, as they say, in other words, you plant greediness and corruption and you will reap it. So, and to bring as answers to cultural demand in African context, we discuss the implications of African social and moral philosophy, which is inherent in Ubuntu and Ujamaa philosophies, which we think that they offer common grounds, principles of respect, harmony, love, peace, and justice. Africans share the Ubuntu values, defending in all aspects the principles of common grounds in almost all Africa, requiring responsibility of all towards one another, all to all, and key principles. Fundamental to understanding Africa, Ubuntu says that no one can realize oneself as an individual or by oneself. Therefore, Ubuntu, ngumuntu ngabantu, or one becomes more fully a person through relationships with others. So Ubuntu and Ujamaa are based on family life, which may cover all life spheres, like that of sports, politics, business, education, social relations, work, etc. And we are a human family, and the world can benefit a lot from African culture, heritage, if development programs are aimed at human civilizational values. Next slide, please. And contribution number 3, which is on functions of education. In discussing education, we take it as a system that it is full of meaning, starting from knowledge, skills, attitudes, values that the individual and society receive from education, through training, through organization, and through development processes. As we see the Paulo Freire say, the system does not fear poor men who go hungry. It fears those who can think. This shows the inherent power that education has in personal and social context. So education responds to three aspects that we bring here. Of course, it can respond to many aspects, but here we bring 3. One of them is culture, which is used for creation, conservation, cultural reproduction, which means objective role of education, which comprises the transmission of knowledge from man to man. We can be talking here of classrooms, of schools, the role of schools. But also we have another role of education, which is political and ideological. That aims at responding to aspirations of each social group instead of defending interests of a dominant group. Education aims at giving a general vision of a state, of a government, of one humanity. But also another finality of education, it is that of which is economical, which means preparation for social life. We mean work. It can give a human person and a society different abilities to create their own jobs, but also specialization. We talk of universities which get people involved in different life skills and areas of science. Next, please. Next slide. Thank you. So, in order to reflect on the relevance of education, we also bring a reflection which is taken from Sun Tzu in his book, The Art of War. According to Tzu, the art of war can be regarded as the process of making peace itself. The book contains a story told by Tzu in his moralistic character, forging the figure of a strategist, philosopher, and a genius general who, to win, must consider 2 points. For example, the first, it is points of avoidance, which means he has to avoid some defects, and those include imprudence, hesitation, impatience, concern for appearance, and excessive complicity. And the second is he has to know the land perfectly, which means he has to know geography, and he has also to know the man, which means he has to know himself and he has to know the enemy. So the piece that draws much attention to any kind of reading in the book, it is as it follows. It says, remember that you are not defending your own interests, but those of your country. Your virtues and your vices, your qualities and your defects influence equally the mood of those you present. Your smallest mistakes always have disastrous consequences. Generally, the big ones are irreparable and fatal. It is difficult to sustain a kingdom which you have brought to the brink of ruin. After destroying it, it is impossible to rebuild it. Nor do you raise the dead. So in this passage, once again, we find a leader discussing about the role of knowledge and the importance of education. And that makes us to the second part of the discussion. And that is understanding peace and conflict. We have seen three pillars in understanding the philosopher's contribution to peace. And now, second part, we will talk about how is understanding important in peace and in peace management. So the first point, we have peace and conflict as social phenomena. The literature, again, it calls us to reflect on human knowledge, starting from Aristotle himself, who takes man as a political animal, but also at the same time is social by nature, because he cannot live alone by himself. And the polis, which is a country, it's a kind of home, city, country for him, and that is the place where he can realize his full happiness. So virtuous life that he has to lead, it is for the purpose of sharing life together with others and not himself alone. Yet conflict arises in that context where social inequalities, power struggles, economical success, and the other challenges are put to the same man so that he can himself manage his life either in crisis or in searching for his own happiness. Next slide, please. Okay, yes. And in this slide, we share a little bit about the sources of conflict and options for peace. What are the theories that explain conflicts? Where do conflicts come from, and what are the options for peace building? We bring here some theories that we've seen them relevant for us to understand their sources and also know what kind of action that can be taken in place. The first theory is that one of theory of community relations, which says that conflicts result from polarization, mistrust, and hostility between different groups in a community. And the options that we have for peace building are: we have to improve communication, comprehend. We have to improve also comprehension between conflicting parts, promote tolerance, acceptance of diversity in the community. The second principle is that one of negotiation, which says that conflicts result from positions, incompatibility, and adoption of zero-gain paradigm. Zero-gain paradigm is that one which is used in Africa, like, for example, when we're talking about elections, where we have elections and the one who loses it all. The one who wins it all. So the options for peace in that challenge, we can see it is separate the conflicting parties so as to negotiate based on the interests rather than positions. We have to reach an agreement from which both can benefit. And we see that rational players will accept to negotiate than to risk a game of win or lose. So negotiations, it comes here as a new paradigm for peace building. Next slide, please. Another theory is a theory of human needs, which says that conflicts result from frustration due to desires to fulfill basic human psychological safety, identity, recognition, and participation and autonomy needs. So options that we have to build peace when we are in that context include: we have to help the conflicting parts to identify and discuss on frustrated needs, reach an agreement and find ways to fulfill them. This is a way of finding peace when we have conflicts resulting from frustration due to desires to fulfill basic humans. And we have another theory, which is a theory of identity as a source of conflict. So it says that conflicts result from feeling of identity threat, mostly due to unresolved historical problems or losses or imposed suffering from one group over the other. And the options we have to build peace are to facilitate meetings and dialogue between conflicting parties so as to identify the threats and the fears of both, and to help them meet and acknowledge together their deep identity needs. Next, please. And we have also other sources of conflict, other theories are cultural comprehension. And according to these theories, they say that conflicts result from incompatibility of different forms of intercultural communication. So the options that we have to help to bring peace are to help promote mutual knowledge between cultures, weaken negative stereotypes from both, and promote and stimulate an effective cultural communication. Once again, we have come back to communication and dialogue. Another theory is a theory of transformation of conflict. And that says that conflicts result from real problems of inequalities and injustice imposed by social, economic, and cultural pressure. So options we have to bring peace in those challenges are to change the structures that cause inequalities and injustice, including economical distribution. So, and we have to develop processes or systems that empower, promote justice, peace, forgiveness, relationships, attitudes, reconciliation, or recognition. Once again, we see in this discussion the relevance we have in education, ethics, and so we are now on conclusion. In concluding, we can say that fairness and transparency characterize peaceful nations. All the countries that we see peaceful, it's because they are fair and transparent. If we want to be peaceful, we have to provide optimal platform for implementing development strategies and programs. And that is in the World Bank report. And we have to provide justice, build effective and accountable and inclusive institutions. Peace depends on our institutional capacity and also our economy. And coincidentally, the origin of the word, it is from the family oikos or nomos, which means the welfare of the home, of the house, of the continent depends on the capacity of its members to engage skilled people, to think globally and act locally. This can be one of the answers. And also we have to build institutions based on the moral principles guiding the house to strengthen the family and its institutions. And it is relevant for us to also think that we have to have relevant and safe cooperation policies. And I am talking about in case we have some kind of aid from other countries, aid should be in form of education and not guns, because guns will be used to support demagogues, while education will be used to empower the people. But also we have, as Africans, we have to wake up to our call to ethical and cultural values, because we have a background already prepared that is of Ubuntu and Ujamaa, which are examples of African values that can be empowered in order to bring about peace in our continent. Next, please. This is just an illustration of the conclusion that we're giving on the topic. It is a point we can reflect on. We have here figures, data, scientifically proven, talking on the military expenditure in Africa and also our GDP. So I think from this diagram, we understand that there is a huge investment in military expenditure, sometimes less than in other sectors, development sectors, which were supposed to be invested in order to bring about development and solve our conflicts in Africa. So this shows us that peace, it's not a natural order. It is an artificial thing that we have to build, and we can engage ourselves in building peace. But also, this picture shows us that we have a potential to build peace because the resources, we have them, human and financial and others, but we have just to know the direction of our investment. And as I was saying, African culture and ethics can also be supported to be peace-based culture, so that we can use them as tools to bring about peace in our continent. And the next, please. Next. Thank you. This is a point of our last remarks for this presentation. And I bring here this picture, which shows a kind of a big message for me. Sometimes I read it a lot, and I will translate the message which is on the picture, which also touches a lot of my emotions. It happened in Japan during a war that this boy carried his brother on his back for burial. And the soldier noticed him and asked him to lay this dead body down so he wouldn't get tired. The boy replied to the soldier, "He's not heavy, he's my brother." The soldier understood and fell down in tears, crying. Since then, this image, I don't know if it is true, since it's true, if it is true, it's nice. This image has become a symbol of unity in Japan. Let this be our slogan too. It's not heavy. He is my brother. She is my sister. If he falls, lift him up. Even if he gets tired, help him. And if he makes a mistake, forgive him. And if the world abandons him, carry him on your back, because he is not heavy. He is your brother. He is your sister. And thank you very much.
That's a powerful message, Eliseu. Thank you so much for your nice presentation. We have definitely learned a lot across Africa and the world. So now I would like to ask participants for comments, contributions, or questions. Please raise your hand if you have a question or comment to make. You can also put your question in chat or your comment, and we read it out for you. And as I said, feel free, please, to turn your cameras on so we can see each other, if you don't mind. That's all right, Donna Pido. That's good that people are reflecting on your presentation, which was quite deep with lots of sources and figures. Yeah, I can see a comment from Helen where that thank you for a very inclusive presentation. As you say, Africa is rich in resources. It is the winner takes all system that makes resources. That means resources are not shared across society. And I think you went through how we should be able to overcome that situation, Eliseu, didn't you?
Yes, Dr. George, this has been really a very schooling moment where I have learned a lot of things through the preparation for this presentation. Sure. And I agree with Professor Ware that really the winner takes all paradigm, it is one of the biggest problems in Africa, because this is a kind of how it has been done and how it is done with our politicians since the introduction of democracy and multi-party systems, whereby it continues one party ruling and controlling the resources, including the kind of thinking of the people and everything that the country has, which is indeed a lot. And it's enough for almost every season of every country.
All right, thank you so much. Afiz Sufianu, please, if you may proceed.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for the wonderful presentation. And it's all inclusive as well. But I will like if you can share more light on Ubuntu or Ujamaa idea to promote the peaceful coexistence in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Afiz, for the question. And indeed, it is a challenging question and very good question. Dr. George, should I answer right now? All right, thank you. Okay. I know that Ubuntu ethics and Ujamaa have been seriously questioned due to some African problems that our cultures present. I will start from Ubuntu. Ubuntu, it is a philosophy that was developed right near here with my neighbors in South Africa, and very much developed into a philosophy. It was well discussed by Bishop Desmond Tutu and the other African philosophers, because Ubuntu means a person, and Ubuntu means personhood. And the characteristics that Ubuntu presents, they give us a space to argue that the African way of conceiving a person, of conceiving life, it can be laid as a foundation because we have the values that the African culture take in it, which are living together as a community, sharing our life together. That's why you find most of the times, for example, when we have a piece of land, our ancestors' piece of land does not belong to him alone. It belongs to all the people who will come through his line. And when you get something to drink, you won't sit to drink alone. You want other people to come and sit with you and drink with them. I will give an example. I know that Afiz is coming from Nigeria. I have lived with the Nigerian colleagues at Arupe who would bring that that thing, I forget the name, cola nuts. And they would well say that cola nuts, you cannot take it you alone. It has to be shared among others, sometimes in the calabar, other times in the cup, and you have to share it with others. And those are contexts, and this is just an example, but also I can bring out the examples of, I watch a lot at my house, African magic, those African movies coming from Nollywood, from Nigeria, all of them giving us lessons that if you dare to live a life alone, you won't go far. You need others. And your person, you as a person, you only become a person through others. So we see that this is a potential background for us to bring unity, to bring a context where we can strengthen our peace ties. This is about Ubuntu. The same thing when we talk about Ujamaa. My final paper at school in philosophy, it was on Ujamaa. And I tried to discuss and try to find something meaningful from what we ourselves can create. I find Ujamaa meaningful because Ujamaa, it is an idea, I think this is Kiswahili, which means family, familyhood. So from Ubuntu, personhood, we are moving to familyhood, which means from person to family. So a family, it is also said to be the smallest nucleus of human community. Our life starts from the family, our life ends in the family. When we are born, we are not the ones celebrating for our birth. It is the family, the community celebrating our birth. The same happens when we die. It is the community, it is the family mourning or feasting due to our death. So community and individual are essential, but none of them can build a desirable society without the other. So Ubuntu and Ujamaa, they offer a background which we could value it and use it as a platform to bring about peace in Africa. Since most of the problems that we have are actual values that Ubuntu and Ujamaa already teach as non-good values. When we talk about corruption, when we talk of individualism, when we talk of many other problems that bring problems among us and raise war, conflicts, we see them that in Ubuntu and in Ujamaa, they are solved. So we can lay these two as foundations for Africa to get peace in the future. Thank you, Dr. Fiz.
Thank you so much for that excellent reply. I'm looking for another comment or question. Probably you'd like to share with us a bit about what is happening in Mozambique currently, you know, in terms of, you know, peace and security in your area and how you're trying to grapple with that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. George. Yes, in Mozambique, if I can share a little bit, currently we have, I think we are peaceful right now, but it's not that peaceful because we have some problems which are present in the 3 different regions of the country. The first is in northern Mozambique. We have the problem of terrorism. We assume that maybe because of natural resources which were discovered, and since it was announced that we had natural resources in northern Mozambique, we have been seeing movements, terrorism growing, people being attacked. Starting from the first attack, I heard a few years ago of youth using knives and other instruments to go to villages and very sophisticated war, difficult and complex, involving arms, guns, and all types of technology, including military actions and drones. So this is one thing. Actually, I'm doing my research with students from the northern part of Mozambique, and we see that a lot people talking about, or not even talk, but experiencing a lot of movementations of people leaving their areas and going to other places. So war in the northern part of Mozambique due to terrorism. But also in the central part of Mozambique, we have the problem of poverty, which has taken to war with guerrillas. We talk of Renamo, which is now an opposition party. Also, there are unfinished wars because problems are not solved. We still have problems which have to be solved, and we have military who have to be included in government in order to end conflict. We don't know if it will end since there are social facts. And in the southern Mozambique, we have also the challenges of kidnapping and criminality, organized criminality, which is also a social problem due to the same problems which are leading to war in Cabo Delgado and the movement of guerrillas in central Mozambique. People feel that they are not included in managing resources, in managing the country, and they have the right over them. So when that right is not granted, when we have institutions which do not respect the principles of justice, we have people everywhere, everyone fighting for his own justice. So this is more or less I can say about the state of Mozambique right now. We are in peace, but we are not that stable due to those problems in the three areas of Mozambique: northern, central, and northern and southern part of Mozambique.
Thank you so much, Eliseu, for that reply, and we wish you, of course, all the best. Now there's a question from, I think, Njaico Lubungu and on decolonization. And she's asking, don't you think decolonization of education is the solution to some of the challenges on peace building? Some thoughts on that?
Okay, Dr. George. Very interesting question. It is actually discussed by many scholars about decolonizing or decolonization of Africa. Briefly, to give answer to that, I would think that at the time we are right now, it is my point of view, we can't successfully talk of decolonization because decolonizing means removing the colonial thing that is in us out and maybe bring another thing in. And colonization is part of our history. The colonial rule left its challenges, but also it has left a legacy. I am presenting here in English, which is not my language. I would be presenting in Portuguese, which is my second language, or maybe I would be presenting in Chewa. But if I talk in Chewa here, nobody will understand me. I have to present in English, and English is not African culture. We have our own languages, it's not an African language. So decolonizing itself is a very problematic concept. Maybe what we have now, we have to discuss now, it's about how to mix up and how can we gain from that mix up. We are using a language which is not ours to describe our cultural context. Maybe we have to find some midway solution which has to be able to mix our Africanicity, our values, while at the same time taking advantages of those global forces which are changing the world so fast. Because talking about decolonization now, it would move us to go back in time into our elders' time, whereby we are supposed to use very rudimental tools in order to get anything. But we are here dressed on good clothes, using computers and using this platform, and our meeting being aired through YouTube. These are aspects of development, globalization, modernity, and they don't make team with decolonizing, because decolonizing means removing everything that is colonial. And globalization is not from Africa, it's from abroad. We are now in a global context, in a global world, where everything has to be shared. What we have to discuss now, for me, in my opinion, it's not decolonization. It is a kind of how we can share the global heritage everywhere we are. Just as Africa shares other people's works, intellectual, cultural, social, political, let's find a platform whereby others can also share of our richness from Ubuntu and from Ujamaa. Dr. George?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I see actually a question from Donna Pido here on Ujamaa villages. And she's asking, so why were widows kicked out of the Ujamaa villages in Tanzania? Did you come across that in your reading?
Yes, I did. In fact, I will just attempt to answer to that. Ujamaa, it was a policy brought through creativity of one man, and this is Mwalimu Nyerere. He gave his contribution to Africa. He gave his contribution to the world. First, I would say that maybe if he had found an open ground to receive his ideas, Ujamaa was supposed to have been developed into something else that could have helped much and brought much change beneficial to the people. Unfortunately, it seems not to have given much. It seems not to have given much because it found barricades from other politicians who did not maybe understand him, or maybe did not favor that Africa be developed to the directions that he wanted. So the side effects of application of Ujamaa in Tanzania, they led to other minor mistakes, which led to that that problem that we are talking about here of expulsion of widows in Ujamaa villages. Most of them, because of reasons which were presented, and they were not in line with the principles of the villages of Ujamaa, of the kind of lifestyle that was being promoted in Ujamaa. But also, I don't discard the possibility of some kind of agitation behind the people in order for them to show that Ujamaa was not consistent. But we can still, despite the problems, there's some inconsistencies that we acknowledge that the Ujamaa had, like those of consensus, which are still discussable. We have many other advantages that Ujamaa brought to Tanzania. Ujamaa is just kilometers away from Mozambique here, but we can imagine the kind of fierce wars that Mozambique experienced, but Tanzania is peaceful. Mozambique shared the policies of Ujamaa in Mozambique through Samora Machel by bringing in the socialism. But the socialism has brought into Mozambique disastrous results than socialism brought in Tanzania. we have Tanzanians very solid in their culture, and the Swahili actually is used as a tool for unity. That was thanks to Jamaa, which brought the people together as a nation, not because they have one language, they have one culture. They have different cultures. No, you know, we have Tanzania, we have the island there of Zanzibar. We know that they are different people. They have their own customs, their cultures, their habits, their traditions, but Swahili was brought as a uniting factor in Jamaa policy to bring the Tanzanians together. And it is the thing that in Mozambique was not brought. Instead, in Mozambique, President Samora Machel ignored culture, ignored traditions, ignored local languages, and he preferred Portuguese as a national language. And that did not work because Portuguese, it's not our language. Despite that, we entered into the fierce war, which we ended despite speaking Portuguese. And today we still have challenges to speak Portuguese. It's not our language. We are trying to bring other languages, local languages, into education, into what we call bilingual education, which we don't know if it will succeed, because there are some patterns which our languages don't have a word to describe them. Globalization, how do we call it in our language? Many concepts, many machines, which we don't know them in our languages, and we still have to go to Portuguese or to English to call them. So Portuguese did not bring solutions as our first president thought, President Samora Machel. Instead, we had problems, and yet we were in socialism. Our socialism was failed despite the Portuguese, which is a modern colonial language. And in Tanzania, of course, we acknowledge the failures, but you succeeded. Tanzania succeeded with Swahili as a national language. English is there, but Swahili helped them to unite the people as a nation.
Well, sorry for the interruption. And
Yes.
would you like to, did you finish your point, Eliseu?
Sorry, Dr. George?
Okay, you finished your point, right?
Yes, I finished it.
Yeah, good. Now, can we turn to the other question actually on zero gain? As somebody, Afiz, would like you to share some more light on the zero gain paradigm, you know, how does one, gain zero, etc. So,
all right. All right. Thank you, Dr. Afiz, once again for the question. Zero gain, of course, it might not be the case in some countries in Africa. I acknowledge the progress that some African countries are registering in democratic evolution, but zero gain paradigm, it is based on that the winner takes it all. The winner takes it all. So as for example, when we have elections, the zero gain is based on that we go for elections, different parties, and each party represented by his president, but the one who is going to control everything in the country, it is the one party that is going to be elected. Most of the times, that is what brings a lot of problems, whereby we find a case whereby the president, of course, it has to be one elected, but maybe we have other political forces that are elected for parliament and for constituencies and for other government institutions, administrators, governors in provinces. What happens in zero gain is that the one who was elected He's the one who is going to appoint in those places where the president has to appoint ministers and the other cabinet members. We have the president appointing the people, all of them from his party, from the ruling party, because he can't indicate a person from another party, fearing that they will call him a coward, a traitor. He can't call people of other parties because other parties will be powerful. They will be against a lot of things that their party will do. So the winner takes it all is based on that. We have won it, and this is our turn. That's why we will rule. The 10 years or 15 years or 20 years will be for us because we have taken it. The people have voted us. Sometimes, although it is not always the people that vote, elections are rigged, but the one who wins takes it, and that is a big problem in Africa. So this is the paradigm actually, which is sometimes at the base of most of the problems that we have.
Excellent, excellent. I don't see another question in chat, and it's about time also that we slowly come to the end of this presentation today. Unless there is a burning issue. Well, there is a comment from Egon Spiegel here saying this is a very good comment to decolonization. And I think this is something we need to constantly, study and see how we can bring in actually these ideas of Ubuntu and Ujamaa into discussion and operation. So on that note, I would like to thank you very much, Eliseu, for the wonderful presentation. And of course, particularly also thank you for your constant participation in these Global Peace Studies webinars for sustainable development. And I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. And I'd like to welcome you again next week. So may the Lord be with you, and we continue discussing important matters of peace and development. Thank you very much indeed, and see you.
Thank you very much, Mr. George, and thanks everyone who has been watching. Thank you very much.